much, and hi and welcome everybody to this month's Music Bar None. Today we are carrying on our Faenza marathon and performing the next 8 pieces in the manuscript. For those of you who are interested, we already did a part 1 and I'll put a link in the description down below. And in those first 8 pieces we perform lots of beautiful pieces by Masho and the ever-famous Anonymous. And I also did a deep dive into the history and the context of the Faenza Codex. So if you're super interested, go and watch that video. But just as a small recap for anyone in the audience tonight who wasn't there and isn't a medieval specialist, the Faenza Codex is a very important and rare example of written out keyboard music which has survived to today. There was a practice of the time of taking famous polyphony and arranging it for keyboard instruments. And as most of the music at the time was 3-part vocal music, what they did is they took the main lower line, the tenor voice, and they put it in the left hand, and they took the higher cantus melody line and they put it in the right hand, and then they made it super ornamented because that fits really nicely on a keyboard. And they left out the third voice because it's not so important harmonically, and the third voice tends to add some salt and pepper and some spice. And when you've got so many notes here, you don't really need anything extra. It's enough. It's got enough chili really going on. So that's what happens in the Faenza Codex and why we consider it so important today. Sadly, we don't actually have a keyboard instrument that's suitable for the Faenza Codex tonight. We have a keyboard instrument, but the range means it's only kind of enough for one hand, a left or a right. You can't really fit both on. So we're kind of going meta, and we're taking this keyboard music that was originally 3-part vocal music, and we're again separating it out, and we're putting the left hand on one instrument and the right hand on another instrument and performing it with different combinations and enjoying the chance to play lots of really fast notes on our recorders and other instruments. In the Faenza Codex, there's kind of 3 genres. You have quite a lot of religious music that was ornamented this way. There's also a section of French chanson, and then there's also an Italian part. And so far, we started with the French part, and we've done like the first part of the French part, and now we're doing the second part of the French part, which will then conclude that. So next time when we do the third part of this Faenza marathon, it will be onto the Italian Trecento repertoire, which I'm looking forward to because that's one of my favorite genres. So tonight, what we're going to try and always do is mix up the original version and also then add in the Faenza version. And I'm really happy that I have Julia and Antonio here to play some of the original versions, and then Fiona and I, we're the masochists, and we're the ones who are doing all the fast notes. So therefore, I would like to invite Fiona and Julia to join me to do the first piece. So I'm just going to just say a few words about this first piece. It's mega famous, and it's got many different names in many different manuscripts, and also it's in really quite a wide range of different types of manuscripts. You find them in Austria and Tyrol and Italy in these big manuscripts full of lots of chansons, but you also find it in the Faenza, and you also find it notated in a ship trumpeter's notebook. There was this guy called Zorzi Trompeta who kept a diary and a log of what he was doing while he was on a ship, and he wrote down some pieces, and a version of this is also located there. So it's kind of a really popular piece at the time, and it always perplexed me because somebody once attributed it to Masho. And every time I played it, I was like, yeah, but this isn't Masho. This is really weird. This can't be Masho. Until I eventually found out that the manuscript in Strasbourg, which a very famous musicologist, he managed to notate everything before the library burnt down and the manuscript was lost. And he wrongly, in his lists, attributed it to Masho, and then since then it sort of became, this piece is by Masho, because it's nice to put a famous name to a piece. But it's totally not. And when you hear it, if you know the style of Masho, you'll notice it's really impossible to be by Masho. So we're going to do two versions. First of all, Julia and Fiona will sing the original song, and then we'll do the Faenza. And I will just scoot out of the way to give you some space. Great, I'm going to swap recorders. So this next piece, Alas mon coeur, is very interesting because it's already appeared in the Faenza Codex. There's a version of this which you can hear if you go and watch the first part. It's based on the same tenor, but it's a completely different cantus part. It's basically a completely different piece, but based on the same original vocal model. Unfortunately, this is one of the pieces that hasn't been identified yet, so we don't actually know what the original chanson was like. But it's also very nice just how it is. amazing. She really took the brunt of most of the top lines in this program. I kind of realised afterwards, and it's really incredible.
I thought she was going to take off.
Yeah.
I thought she was going to stop breathing.
Yeah, I thought so too. And especially she's really like taking the effort and performing from the. Very impressive. Very, very, very impressive. So we're going to move on to the next piece in the codex. I'm trying to be quite consistent and also virtually always following the order. And we have a really epic, beautiful piece. It was also very, very popular at the time. And Julia is going to come and we're going to mix up the Faenza and the original because it's a ballata form, which... For those who are sitting in the audience who can't remember, sorry, I'm sitting in front of like mainly only medievalists, so it's kind of, I really feel like I'm talking to the converted. But this it has a very distinct form, normally of. Actually, I'm not going to say anything. Just enjoy this one. I'm going to explain it when we do it after the cocktail, because I'll be drunker, and we do something that we don't follow the form exactly how it should be, so it's not a clear example. But anyway, we're mixing up the original and the Faenza. So, what do I need to play in this? Oh yes, I do sing. And I have to play a F, which is the bigger one. And I should maybe do you want to say the title, because you always say things more beautifully than me. Anyway.
It's Deduto Sei.
So beautiful.
I know.
And can I have an F to see if I'm somewhere close? did the marathon part of the but I'm so dry now. Definitely need a cocktail now. And as you can see, that's why we kind of mixed the original and the Faenza together, because if we did the whole form of the original and then the whole form of the Faenza, that would have been the whole concert by itself. However beautiful it is. So, first of all, I'm going to take my instruments away so they don't get sticky. And we're going to move on to the most important part of the evening, which is, of course, the cocktails. So, I thought I'd make something quite seasonal. You know, we're in February. I think most of us have been ill. I was ill a couple of weeks ago and I'm still coughing and sniffing. So this cocktail is actually very healthy. It has a lot of lemon and honey and some gin as well, just to make it drinkable. And it was actually a prohibition cocktail. So that's one of the cocktails that was invented in the 20s and 30s, when basically in America you couldn't officially drink alcohol, so they all kind of went down underground and they created speakeasies and they created lots of very sweet, yummy cocktails to hide the fact that most of the alcohol was really awful, because it was totally bootleg and illegal. So that's why we now have so many cocktails today. It's basically all coming out of this prohibition era. So actually, thanks America for closing down the alcohol. It had some reason after all. So this is called a bee's knees, I guess because of the honey. But also bee's knees is an expression in English which means kind of it's the best. If you're the bee's knees or it's the bee's knees, it's kind of the best thing. So maybe this will be the best cocktail we'll have of the season. You never know. So, if anyone's interested in the real recipe, I will put a link below. But just so you know, it's kind of easy. It's 5 centiliters of gin, 5 centiliters of lemon, and then like half the amount of honey. I made a kind of a honey syrup so it dissolves quicker. And I have put that in this shaker. I'm going to go and add some ice, and then I'm going to shake it around, and we will have a really nice cocktail. And I made the mistake of putting the lid on the cocktail. So, this is when we need a cocktail shaking anthem. We need a cocktail shaking anthem. A talented audience. Yeah. Now, can I get the look? Yes. So, I'm going to pour these cocktails, and then I'm going to invite Fiona and Julia and Antonio to join me, and we're going to have a little chat about medieval life. I must admit, I'm a bit scared. It might need more honey. You might find it kind of really sour. So, to the bee's knees.
To the business.
And I have enough for all you guys afterwards as well. Don't worry. It's refreshing. Yeah. I would put maybe a tiny bit more honey.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's quite...
I can definitely taste the lemon.
So So for the next round for you guys, we'll tweak the recipe and add a bit more. Add a bit more honey. But it's nice, no?
Yeah, it's
It
nice.
feels like a very healthy drink.
Yeah.
Really.
I think I won't be coughing afterwards. So last time we did the Faenza, obviously I had a lot of Faenza-orientated questions, but I feel like we have someone new here, and Julie, you also haven't been around for a while, so we're just going to like have a chat about life. About life. So, for instance,
Arthur.
tell me,
Yes.
Arthur. Arthur, tell me.
You know, so I think if I could choose my name, I probably wouldn't choose my name. That's the truth. Yeah.
Maybe that was what I was feeling. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're new-ish at school. I think
I'm
you
newish at
came
school. I'm at my second year.
in your
yes.
second year.
My second year.
And what brought you to medieval music?
That's a very interesting question, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't think it was one thing though. I think it was sort of many things that sort of went together and then kind of led me. Because I studied before in Portugal and I studied recording. So inevitably early music a bit. I didn't have much choice. I think it was a sort of coming from. Also from my more personal side, because I'm also sort of I also do composition, and I think mostly my main interest in medieval music started as a compositional interest, in the sense of trying to understand necessarily the thought behind it, like the thought behind the music, how to make the music like this sort of rational framework with which the music is made. Because listening to music, it's you can listen to music and sort of listening now to a medieval piece of music. It's still more or less this, or at least we try to be the same sound object as it was like 500
As in, like,
years ago.
when
600.
we are trying to rediscover what they were doing, not just like.
It's like no, what you're doing, but that's the thing.
taking
But one thing is
pages.
what they were doing, another thing is what they listened, what they were thinking, what they were doing. Like the sort
So
of
actually,
mental
the
framework.
context of it, not just like.
The context, yeah, I'd say, and I think it started more like trying to understand more the sort of mental framework of it, and then.
And do you find coming to Basel and to Skoda, which is obviously very intensely medieval, if you're doing that program, has that been like giving you some answers or showing you some new ideas?
I think it's mostly given more questions, but I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I think definitely now that getting to do the music, sort of immerse in the music, like sort of, and doing it like on a daily basis. Yeah, definitely, lots of questions. But
And did you have a chance to play much of it before, or was it still like a relatively fresh genre when you came?
I think I was very alone, also in a place because it was a very particular interest and also personal interest. I was the nerd, and I get to be the nerd again, like nerd among nerds, fellow nerds. So
I remember that feeling when I
it's
first
different.
came to Skoda.
Exactly, yeah.
I was like, oh, I found my people. We're all nerds.
Exactly, but that's good, having a community of nerds with which to do nerd stuff.
Yeah. It's
yeah.
really beautiful.
Yeah.
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 Exactly. I mean, like, this is kind of the nerdiest thing you could like. My social life.
Yeah, I think this is what medieval music's all about. Is lemonade and Faenza.
Yeah. And Julie, you're kind of like, so you're relatively new at school and you're like kind of coming to the other side. I know this is like a big question, but how has your time at school been? Has it been interesting? Are you glad you came? This kind of triggered tears. One shouldn't answer
Yes, I'm glad I came. I don't know, it's been long, like 5 years. It was very interesting, lots of questions. I'm very happy to leave as well, but because it's a very small place. And it's good to leave at some point, but I don't know.
Yes. I think that's often about studying in a way you come for answers, but it just shows you how many questions there are actually in the world. Like the more you know, the more you realise you don't know. It's one of these interesting situations. And Fiona, we've been now doing quite a lot of this in tabulation, this keyboard Faenza. Have you had any thoughts? Has anything jumped into your head about like what this manuscript might have been for or about? Or?
I think it's purely speculations because I should have been looking at some preface of editions or any kind of academic things being a musicology student, but kind of like I was so I was really deep into the music itself, I just bury myself in the manuscript and did not go look at articles and stuff. But there's one thing that is really particular that I find from all these Faenza pieces is that they would actually repeat. So they would have multiple versions, multiple goals of writing this one polyphonic piece. So it makes me think as if it was like they were done by different people, and actually this is like a little collection of student work from different students, and the teacher is rating them according to which is the best go at intabulating this piece. And so we had the first 8, which are quite classic, and actually if you look for Spotify or YouTube, everyone is just playing the first few pieces out of Faenza. And then you have to, and then you go back and there are more complex examples and the style kind of change a little bit, but there is some sort of like model that you can search from the little diminution, the little figures that they use, like it kind of repeats. Yeah. But then you kind of feel like maybe that's another person having a go at this. And maybe they're being ranked, just like how we would rank them when we are playing it ourselves. Yeah, so it's all pure speculations, but I find this very interesting too.
Yes, because there is really literally like Elas Mon Coeur comes twice, Jour, the first piece, also comes again. And
exactly.
This keeps happening.
Yeah.
And actually that makes sense if it's like sort of, if you say it's like a sort of academic work in the sense that it's sort of pieces that are made by students, is like involves a pedagogical. Because I was going to ask sort of, do you think this is written for the keyboard?
Yeah, it does work very well on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
So I try to play some of them on recorders, and for some of them you really feel that it's really tricky. And then not a keyboard, but I play on organetto, at least the right hand.
Yeah.
And then everything works, like it just goes.
Yeah.
And for some of them, it feels like that, indeed. So I would say...
Yeah. Because my impression is a bit like that on a keyboard it's sort of very dramatic, even sometimes the formula. But then there's also the question, why is it written like it is? Because, for example, if I think of a sort of keyboard intabulation, I would think of a more kind of intabulation kind of score, like with either a system of a physical descriptive system of how to play, like in which place of the instrument, not necessarily like a staff. But if you say, I think it makes sense if you say that, like this sort of academic work in a sense that how to make music.
And why does instrumental music have to be separately notated other than vocal music?
That's it,
be like keyboard music being a very good reason, because you actually have to look at 2 lines at the same time, or 3, and then now you have the need to re-notate something that has already appeared in vocal manuscript, which is keyboard instruments. So it goes into this, and then later the organ tablatures, where you have to look at 3 lines, and if they still do the part score thing, then it's impossible, especially for some of the organists who literally just know the organ tablature and don't know how to read mensural notation later. Yeah.
Because I think also for people, for instance, out there who are not specialists, it's also really interesting. Do I have an example here? Like,
which arguably in Basel is not a lot of people.
Well, the world. Through the lens of the camera.
That's true.
In the vocal manuscripts of the time, the parts were written out separately. So you had like the cantus line, and then the tenor line, and the contratenor line, So you could never really see it as a full piece. But the Faenza is written really like keyboard music today. You have the right hand and the left hand on top of each other, and that's also in the 14th and 15th century not so often done in that way.
Yeah.
So it's...
What it also reminds me of this sort of, and also the music, because most of these like sort of, you have a tenor which is more or less almost copied, and then you have like sort of, it usually is the melody, which is very interesting. But it reminds me of, for example, something akin to what is in the, for example, the Berkeley treatise, which I think is like
Yeah.
1370s, right? Where you have this practice described of almost like Lego-like, of saying, okay, for this note of the tenor, you can apply this formula, and it's not really something. It's not the same as, for example, later practice of like 16th century of diminuting a melody. It's really thinking, for this note of the tenor, you apply this.
Yeah.
Let's call it a lick, because it was really a riff. So this note of tenor, you can apply this formula. This note of the tenor, you can apply this formula, and yeah. But I think perhaps this is the middle ground in a sense. The formulas are always around the melody. There is one, but there's still formulas, like sort of very formulaic, like you were saying. There are formulas that you can identify, and they're very keyboard-like.
Yeah.
That is true.
I think that's one of the many reasons why they always mix up when they see the word organum, or they don't know whether it's for organ or organum, because organum works pretty much also in the way where Vatican organum treatise or Berkeley, they would be like having this tenor movement and then having this here's how you make the first part, and then also in organ these same figures come back, and later there's the fundamentum, also even from Paumann. So it's all like this kind of tenor movement against what kind of counters you can do.
Yeah. So I'm just waiting for some AI Faenza to be churned out. You could like just give a tenor line and it will just shove out the formulatic.
Shout out to anyone who wants to.
I think they tried that with Schubert, don't they? That like the unfinished symphony. Yeah. They tried to finish it.
So now we should
still unfinished. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Somebody interested in doing a doctoral thesis?
Cool. So I think that was lots of chatting, very nerdy chatting. So let's do some music now and finish off these cocktails. It's the 2G instruments.
I have no idea how yours is, but when does it need to find? Because there's a bit of tape on the walls.
So this is, after all these really long, epic, huge form versions, this is a very short piece because we don't know what the vocal model was. We've only got the Faenza left, so we're just going to go from the beginning to the end, and it's a short and sweet way to come back into the music. It's Vive non qui. I'm playing complete bullshit.
That sounds great. I wish I could do bullshit like this.
So which recording is
The
this?
original.
That's what the C is. Okay. I'm going to invite Antonio to come and join us for the next piece. Now we also need yes. Yes. So this is another quite epic one because we're going to be doing the full form. They really loved quite complex poetic forms back in the day. And for the people out there who are not specialists, I always call it like this, the form that it's a virelay, and it's like ABBA A, because you have 5 lines of music. The first and the fifth are the same, and they have the same music. And then this second, third, and fourth are a bit like a verse. And you have fresh music, like B music, which is then repeated for the third text. But then the fourth line of text, it goes back and it uses the same music as the 1 and 5, like the A music. So you have a kind of A, B, B, A, with these outer A's being kind of a bit like a chorus, or like at least a sort of a more profound thing that they want to say twice. And we are doing the full form, and we're mixing up the original polyphony, and we're throwing in some Faenza. So on the second B and the A, you'll hear Fiona going crazy over here. And that's why, like me as an instrumentalist, I'm not a keyboard player, but Faenza is really, really useful because like you learn it and you play it and you get it in your fingers. And then when you play a really, really long form like this, or vocal music, hopefully, eventually your fingers just start adding all these like oodles naturally. You have a very organic way of learning how to ornament the vocal polyphony that you're playing. So, this piece is Au su vous dormir trop, Madame Jolie. Thanks. we come to the last two pieces that we're sandwiching together, and this is one where I have to play all the fast notes.
Finally.
Finally.
One organetto is not enough.
Yes. Yes. So sometimes you have these really epic long forms, and then sometimes you have very short little untexted, just like pieces, which probably had some context, like they just needed some music for a priest to get from A to B, or for whatever little reason. And the first piece I'm going to do is one of these. It's a very short, untexted little piece, and I'm coupling that together with the piece afterwards, which is very similar in character, and that's J'aime le beauté. It's also very short. We also don't know what the vocal model is, but they're a very fun little pair of pieces. There's just one tiny little extra thing we could do, because in the manuscript, like, the next piece is actually the same as the first piece we played today. And as it's actually one of my favourite pieces, I think we could just do it Faenza Odyssey. Yeah. Because you haven't heard too many notes tonight, you know.
Yeah.
There's always time for more fast notes in your life. It's also my favourite recorder that I get to play this on. So. That's actually why. So this is kind of like the encore, and it's the final French piece in the Faenza. So when we come back for part 3, you'll hear some crazy Italian Trecento stuff. A, B, A, B, A, B. 4, 5.